everyone. I'm delighted to welcome you to our panel discussion on digital well-being in education. In an era where technology intertwines with learning, our panel, led by Fiona Forman, will explore the critical importance of fostering digital well-being in educational settings. Following our discussion, we will have a question and answer round, and we encourage you to ask our panelists some questions. So Fiona Forman of Outside the Box Learning Resources is an author, speaker, facilitator, and trainer in the areas of well-being and positive psychology. Having spent many years as a primary school teacher, she is passionate about placing well-being at the heart of school life. Joining Fiona in our discussion are our three panellists. Eithne Sheoin, teacher at Clogharenca National School in Kildare. Eithne is an experienced eTwinner, having undertaken projects on well-being, creativity, and cultural diversity. Jane McGarrigle, project officer at WebWise. WebWise promotes the autonomous, effective, and safer use of the internet by young people through a sustained information and awareness strategy targeting parents, teachers, and children. Emma Masson, sixth-year student at Sacred Heart Secondary School in Drogheda, County Louth. Emma is a member of the WebWise Youth Advisory Panel. So I'll now hand over the mic to Fiona to begin our discussion.
Great. Thanks so much, Ava. Delighted to be here. And the theme of today's panel discussion is digital wellbeing in education. And since the COVID-19 pandemic, this has definitely been a very topical subject. So I'm going to go to each of the panel members to ask, in your area of work, what are you currently seeing regarding students' wellbeing in the wake of the pandemic? And I think I'll go to you first, Eithne, on that as a teacher.
Thank you very much. Well, really, in looking at wellbeing, I, as a primary school teacher, have to take the child first. And it has been a great battle of mine over the years in taking the balance between the digital learning child or the growing human child. And I think this is definitely something, in my own school in particular, and among the teachers that we've met in foreign schools that we've partnershipped with over the years, finding that balance is extremely difficult. As an outcome of the COVID-19, where we see great skills in relation to using particular apps and programs with technologies, there is that improvement that can be incorporated very simply into classwork. However, it's simply to show or display classwork. So we're still not seeing that innovative use of, I suppose, the problem solving, the creating, the questioning what they can do with technologies because they don't know the hows. Currently, I must even admit that some of my own colleagues on the younger scale wouldn't know how to power off a computer properly, or if there was troubleshooting, they genuinely do not know how to figure any of that out. So there is that aspect of it as well, from the teacher's point of view, that we do need more, I suppose, more training or more opportunities to learn such challenging tasks. Because in a classroom environment where our cubes might fall on the floor or a jigsaw puzzle might be missing a piece, if we can't solve a problem in showing a child or even using a technology, then we can't fix it in front of them. We can't solve it. We can't create a new jigsaw piece there in front of them. Because these are the things children look at. This is how they learn. Putting them in front of a screen or with a game that they can create or even coding, it doesn't give them the ooh, or just the inspiration to want to be different, to create something new. So I think in a primary level, that's something we have to look at. And on the wellbeing side of that, they don't have the resilience. They don't have the initiative and the ability to simply step back, question, or dive in when they need to. Because again, that's the fun of it, really getting the hands dirty, out in the muddy puddle, in among the wires or the buttons or the devices that actually do something that their brain didn't expect them to.
Great, thanks for that, Eithne. And again, I think what I'm hearing there is the idea of the gaps in the knowledge. I know from as being a former primary school teacher, when I was teaching myself, often if a problem would happen with technology, it would be one of the children that would actually fix it for me. Absolutely. Because they were knowing more and they had less of a fear. I would have a little bit more of a fear of
I
touching
think that's
it.
very relevant, especially for the teachers' side of their mental state and their stress levels and that. But we've always given tools to children for them to solve.
Yeah, true.
So really, if there's something that needs to be worked on, if we have a basic understanding, even on how to facilitate it.
Yes.
Let them be the learners
Yes.
and the discoverers.
And they love that.
And let them be the
Yes.
teachers to
Yeah,
us,
so
because
true.
again, that's something they really
Yes.
enjoy. You
Yes.
have those teachers among your class who will
Yes.
be
Yeah.
heads of businesses
Exactly.
or principals in schools.
Yeah, true.
So, but it's getting that personal strength for them. They're quite, since COVID, I find in my older children, they're very passive. They will sit. I don't think I ever had a mannerly class like I had last year, where they would sit and listen to everything the teacher said.
Well,
But their listening skills were, yes, they would sit and be there, but when it came to actually solving something or returning something, they didn't always have it. They would respond in how they expected, they thought you were asking them.
right.
So then when it came to actual like critical thinking or discussion, they found that very difficult. And where we would always have the more boisterous and the ambitious child, they would sit pleasantly, afraid of making mistakes, afraid of being maybe on the teachings of being super nice. They didn't want to step on or insult another schoolmate. And like this is
Okay.
happening right down at 7 and 8 year olds, which I do find quite disheartening and
Yeah.
must
So
overcome.
certainly challenges there
Yeah.
since, great. And I'm going to ask Jane that same question. So what are you seeing as the challenges?
So I suppose since the pandemic, there is definitely a recognition of the important role of digital technology in young people's lives, a recognition that we need to teach young people digital media literacy skills. But if we look at what the research is telling us and what's going on for children and young people, online bullying is still the #1 issue affecting children and young people online. So for us over the last couple of years in WebWise and the Online Safety Initiative, we felt it was really important to revisit that topic, to look at it, to develop some new resources and supports for teachers in this area. And see, the Department of Education launched their Canaltas Action Plan last year as well. We did consultation groups with educators, with our youth panel, and I suppose came together to develop some new supports to help schools in this area, to help schools revisit the area. So we've developed new online courses. These are short 2-hour self-directed courses in understanding, recognising, responding and preventing cyberbullying. They can be accessed via the WebWise website. They're a really great course for new teachers, for teachers who want to go back and I suppose check in with this topic. It looks at the legal framework around bullying, the requirements, the roles, responsibilities of the school, scenarios, what to do if dealing with an incident, bringing it into the curriculum. And then to support these courses, so there's primary and post-primary courses. We also launched a new junior cycle unit of learning called the Respect Effect. It aligns to the new SPHE curriculum. And again, we worked with our youth panel and other teachers to develop this resource. And there's some really up-to-date scenarios there that look at prevalent issues for young people. So things around banter, those subtle forms of bullying, identifying and recognising bullying, which young people have told us that they find it hard to actually recognise when something was upsetting them. It was only after the fact. So there's lessons there to help tease that out and building empathy and resilience as well. They're all available on our website. But I suppose we regularly talk to our youth panel about what's going on for them and what they think about technology in their worlds and the role technology is playing. Particularly this year, we've seen some big changes. And I suppose I'd like to share some of the things they're telling us and what's concerning them. First of all, young people recognise the benefits of technology, that they recognise the important role it plays for them. They see it as a tool for good to help solve the big problems, housing, climate change, inequality, those sorts of things. But they also see that it has the potential to bring up problems elsewhere and have concerns around things like their privacy, their rights online, recognising and verifying information online. And I suppose that's where our roles is to help them build the skills around understanding privacy. And I suppose we have lots of resources to help in that area as well.
That's brilliant. Thanks so much for that, Jane. And that very much ties in with what you were saying, Eithne, in terms of that gap in the knowledge that those resources are there for teachers to use. And again, it's just, I always find it so shocking that bullying is still an issue.
Yeah.
You know, after my 30 odd years of teaching, we're still talking about it. I mean, hopefully we'll find some breakthrough way. Maybe it will be through technology or whatever that we
Just
finally crack
on that as well, and I think there's possibly even an increase in it online because it's been so well looked after and managed within the schools. But even
yes.
at that, it's like they learn the skills off, but they don't use them and having to apply them. And that
Yes.
can only come through social interactions,
Yes, true.
face to face, actual like
true.
group bonding, building,
Empathy.
empathy, all collaborative work. And it can be difficult to do online, but that's somewhere like where the eTwinning platform has been really beneficial because
Brilliant.
it's pupils, we've worked pupils throughout Europe where they think they have the same problems, but when they meet, they realise they're all very similar.
Good.
And they can just trash things out and work on them that way.
So
Yeah,
on.
but it is finding opportunities to practice and to develop the
Yes,
skills properly.
skills, yeah. And same question to you, Emma. What are you seeing as a student? I suppose you're there in the thick of it. You were saying earlier that you were in second year when the schools closed for the first time and you didn't get to do your junior cert. So you really have been impacted by the pandemic. And what are you seeing as a result of that with your peers as well?
You can see a big generation gap in my age anyway. I know I have a big knowledge on technology because my dad influenced me when I was younger. So I grew up knowing how to use a laptop, how to use my phone, how to download apps. But I can see some of my peers wouldn't know how to open like Microsoft 365. They'd have to ask me, how do I use Canva? How do I save this to my laptop? And we can't be educated on it because we would be the most knowledgeable on how to use it. So we have teachers coming to us asking us, is this okay? Is that right? We have prefects in our school for IT, diversity, to help teachers understand where students are coming from. And I think that's a big point in teachers like accepting that we need young people's help in getting to a good point, because the only people that really know what young people need is young people. There's so much that adults can do looking at what we're going through without hearing our voices. There's not much. And I know I joined the youth panel to hear other people my age's opinions, because there's only so much I would know coming from an all girls school. I would not know any lads' point of views on what they go through online. So I wanted to join the youth panel so I could hear everyone's perspective, so I could have an open mind when I'm going to my school and saying these are the issues we are going through. I wanted to be able to say, okay, women might be going through different issues than men, but there's also issues that is affecting everyone, like online bullying and sexual harassment online. We hear one part of it, but the youth panel has really given me the opportunity to be able to hear amazing point of views, and my mind has been opened. This is only my second year on the panel, and I have become so informed on the different things that is wrong with the internet. I used to love being online. I was very oblivious to what was going wrong online. And I'd sit online for hours and be like, this is great. And now when I went on the youth panel, I was like, okay, I need to learn how to control my digital well-being, because I'm going to grow up addicted and I'm going to grow up relying on technology to be able to live my life. And to a point, I think we all do, because it's the only way we know about these conferences and be able to develop in the real world. But it's a good separation of learning.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot.
And again, the speed of change, I think Deirdre talked about that this morning. The speed of change, I think, is just massive. I don't think we've ever seen that in education. The change, the speed of it so much can be very overwhelming for both teachers and students. So to try and navigate that is very hard. So we do need much as resources and support as much as possible. Well, I suppose if anything good came out of the pandemic, it was the idea that education did become more innovative. And again, Deirdre spoke this morning about how, you know, people were maybe forced, and I was one of those people myself, forced onto the online space, because again, you might be afraid to try stuff out, and then when you're forced to, you actually have to. So again, what did you see in your own work? I'll go to you first, Eithne, there, in terms of the innovation.
I'm going to be a little bit of a naysayer on the online life now, just for devil's advocate, in relation to especially younger people. But I'm all for the wonderful technologies and developments, especially on an education field in relation to spell checking, C-pens, best invention in the world. the tools that can enable children who might have learning difficulties, but these amazing intelligence that haven't been able to be unlocked before.
Yep.
So in being able to apply skill, opportunities to them for them to develop the skills. Again, it doesn't need to come back 100% fold on the teacher, it's facilitating. However, these children then they're meeting up on pars on an educational level. And here's where my biggest issue is. The social level, the ability to actually communicate with each other. And I just have envisioned these things for the future where that's on one language. I would struggle to see how they're going to initiate conversations or discussions or communicate with people from different cultures and different languages where they find it difficult to interpret each other's language as is. So finding that, incorporating things within the school now with us, we're much more, we've got committees for everything with the children now, where we would have simply had the older children might look after the younger children at break time, they'd play with them, whatever. We now have set up structured committees for wellbeing, buddy group systems. We have an Irish committee, student council, all of these structured groups. So as we can bring children together, giving them a voice, but also offering them opportunities to use that voice, to use their own personalities and their own beliefs, and have them simply monitored by a staff member. We participate very little in them. We simply take minutes or whatever, but we can be there as a guide when needs be. And I think these particular innovations have been wonderful. These have been, again, we've worked on these with our colleagues in partner schools, and we've all found that the independence in the children is improving greatly through this. Also, their respect for each other as individuals and not just like school children. We still have a difficulty where there's still a fear of parents of certain teachers, and parent-teacher meetings coming up, and the dread of this and the dread of that. I do see that has improved, possibly through the more communication we may have had online during COVID, and then there's been a continued level of more regular messaging. But it is very difficult on a teacher for that. I mean, the parents still expect that high level of texts or emails or whatever. So again, that is something to be looked at. In relation to the children then as well, we've really had to focus on all elements of child's well-being, from their active learning to emotional, and their eating and their lifestyle, their healthy eating, well-being as well. So setting up programs within the school and working with programs by the EU have been really, really good for us. We've used food dudes. WebWise is just something I would absolutely swear by. I thought since it came out originally, I think these are fantastic initiatives as well, and we're making sure that they're core parts of our learning in our school.
And again, empowering, that's what came up for me when you were talking there, and I know Deirdre talked about that this morning, about the whole idea of digital wellbeing is about empowering children, and you're very much doing that. So again, to use it for the positives is so important, isn't it? And Emma, how would you see that in terms of the positives, I suppose, or the innovation that has maybe come in the last few years?
Especially in schools that were running pre-technology, like advances. I know in my school, we've been running since like 1960. So we did not have laptops or iPads until maybe 10 years ago. Okay. So I joined, and we only used laptops maybe once or twice a week. And that would only be in second year when we were doing classroom-based assessments, or in TY when we were doing projects online every single day. We would not use laptops or iPads or phones, and for first or third year, 100%, and I wouldn't know, but I'd imagine not in Leavings or either. But when we went through COVID, we obviously moved to online, and we had to learn how to use Microsoft 365 and how to use Teams and how to do projects online and how to do independent research was the most important thing for me, because we were just being told what to learn when we were in school before COVID. We were being given a book and we were given notes, and you say, okay, study that. If you were given like a research project, you really didn't know what to do pre-COVID. You kind of just Google it, write it down, that was it. And then when we went back from COVID, we saw a massive shift in how our school was running. We were using laptops every single class, iPads every single class. All our homework was online. We had to submit it. It wasn't just hand a piece of paper to teacher anymore. And you'd be doing research projects in class as a part of the curriculum. So you'd be having the chance to learn how to do independent study, which I think is important for going on to college. Because obviously your teacher's not going to be sitting there holding your hand, telling you, okay, your homework is done this day. hand it up to me this day. No, when you're in college, you will be told, hand it in that day. It's all independent. You'll be doing it yourself. And that's what school's preparing me for now. But it wasn't before. We were just like writing on paper, and now it's great because I see the younger years are learning how to use laptops in first year. And honestly, we learned in TY. So the fact we now are letting the first years and second years like learn technology and develop that is going to be great for their futures.
Yes.
Because they're not going to go into college and be like, oh my God, what is this?
Shock.
Why do I have to go to a library, get a book, study myself? The teacher's not telling me what my project is on. This is going to be a madman, like a mad show. It's honestly the one good thing that came out of the pandemic is that the development in technology in schools, especially schools. I know there's a new school near me and it opened after COVID, and they are all about technology. That's all online. They went into school knowing how to use technology. Schools that opened beforehand did not. So we're developing, and it's honestly.
And a steep learning curve, isn't it? What it was for all of us, that we might never, it wouldn't have been that steep, certainly not for me anyway. I would have been reluctant to embrace it all, but we all had to, and the good that came out of that, as you said, so that is brilliant. And Jane, would you find the same?
Yeah, so I suppose WebWise is part of IDGE, the new school support service.
Right.
Formerly, we were part of PDST. And technology and education. So our colleagues were kind of at the forefront of supporting everyone to try and get online and get to grips with remote learning and all that. And, you know, schools can still access face-to-face supports in terms of digital technologies and good practice and online courses. There's lots of good stuff there. In terms of ourselves, it was a good opportunity to reflect and say, you know, I just mentioned we've loads of resources there and they're great. They're not very good if the teachers don't feel comfortable using them in the classroom or don't feel like they have a good enough understanding of what digital citizenship is or anything like that. So, you know, we had to do something to address that gap. And you mentioned it yourself, you know, sometimes teachers feel like the kids know more than they do. So one of the things we developed was an online course, an introduction to digital citizenship. So the kind of first half of it, there's primary and post-primary available, and they're all free to access through the IDGE Technology in Education website or our own website. And it kind of unpacks the concept of digital citizenship and breaks it down into different themes, different topics, gives explainers on each what those themes mean: ethics, well-being, respectful communication, commerce online. All those areas are kind of explained so that the educator gets an idea of what that topic is. I understand that topic, what that means in the classroom, and then looks at the practical application and how we might embed digital citizenship across the classroom. So that's one of the things. I don't think we can talk about innovation without talking about AI as well, and Deirdre mentioned it. And look, that document she highlighted, the ethical EU document, is a really good document. This is an area we're looking at. It's a big area. The generative AI thing has, you know, exploded last year. So we are looking at the practical implications for educators and for school leaders, and are developing I suppose, considerations for ethical use of AI in the classroom, in school, implications for school policy, and there will be supports and guidance available to schools shortly through our website as well. So there's more stuff coming there.
Brilliant, because the speed of that is just mind-blowing with the AI. You know, 1 minute it was just out there, seemed kind of, you know, way in the distance, and now all of a sudden it is in education. So I need to catch up on that myself, definitely. And in terms of eTwinning, Eithne, how can that help with pupil wellbeing and digital wellbeing?
Just on a classroom perspective, the platform on eTwinning, which has grown tremendously in the last, I think my first login or registration was probably about 2006. Our internet was so poor in the school, we were one of 5% where every image had a red X on my one. And I had to very quickly figure out that, if I right click, I can go into some US something code, blah, 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 blah. Made it all up as I went along. And I was able to access things. It did make it very difficult for me at the time to upload information that we were sharing with Iceland at the time. But now the platform is so much more teacher and pupil friendly. Still not 100% there, but I can't believe the difference in it. all of our children in school have, you mentioned Microsoft, we use Google, so all of our children have Google accounts. It was from junior infants during COVID, but it's now simply from first class up. So they have their own access codes to get into the Chromebooks and tablets and that if they wish to share information. So through eTwinning then, because we have our own school domain, the children's accounts are locked between themselves. You know, they don't have access to the outside world for Gmail and so on. But it also means that with that domain, we haven't ventured this far yet, we could give pupils access on the eTwinning platform where they could independently communicate with peers in partner schools, which would be absolutely fantastic. Now, we do have big concerns over the safety or the inclusion, really, because we're still in an area where internet is not fully accessible to children. So you're given homework to most of the class, but some don't have it done. And I would be very conscious of how that can make a child feel. So I tend not to give it at all. It's an option. Everything in my classroom is optional. They can choose whether to hand homework up digitally or on paper, but they must have a balance between both throughout the term. But the platform in allowing our domain to be used privately on it is fantastic. And I have really, really high hopes on that, because they can develop their social media, their chat skills, their ability to express emotions, to share knowledge, because that's really, really what we want. We want them to develop the skills of learning from each other, researching strategies from their own classroom, from how it's done with peers elsewhere in the world or in Europe at the moment. So these are the skills that the tools can help them learn. Not so much learning how to use the tool, but using those skills online or across these tools. I mentioned the C-Pen earlier on. This is, I don't know if all of you are familiar with it. It's a size of a USB stick. I've got children in 6th class who were on a reading level of 3rd class, and they're now reading the same novels, etc. And they're plugging into their laptops. It prints it all out. They're highlighting their nouns, their adjectives, whereas we would have said they were not able to read.
Right.
All they couldn't do was the physical symbols that were on page. They understood the language.
Brilliant.
So these are fantastic.
Yeah.
And again, eTwinning will give them highlights, because it's the digital world that their skills have already developed quite rapidly on.
And that sense of connection to the outside world and other countries must be incredible as well.
Yes, yeah.
Just time-wise, I'm just going to go to the last question briefly before we open up to questions and answers. And my favourite question is, in terms of well-being, what do we need to see more of right now? And I might go to you on that, Emma.
Definitely
As a student.
communication.
Communication.
Because-
What do you mean by communication?
The youth panel, letting young people meet each other in a safe space and talk about online issues. I remember at my first ever youth panel meeting, I was terrified of what was going to happen. I didn't know if anyone would be open-minded to talk, but the minute we started talking about online bullying, everyone had their hands up. Everyone was saying what was wrong with the internet, what can we do to help it, and it's communication that needs to be happening between young people and between adults, and interconnecting both adults and young people, because I know in my school we don't have that. It's more, we have a few people who would go if there's an issue. We like being asked questions about the internet, because we do know the answers. It's just we don't want to be forcing technology on people who don't want to hear it. So it's nice being able to talk about the issues of online, because we can solve it. It is issues that can be solved if the rules are followed, if it's actually implemented correctly. Because I know one of the worst platforms you could be on right now is Twitter. We were talking about earlier how there's not a lot of legislation on Twitter for if you post something, there's loopholes on every website. But Twitter seems to be the worst for being able to post it and not get it taken down or not get it reprimanded. And you don't learn. You don't learn if you're not told it's not right. So it's honestly communication. If someone does something wrong, you tell them they did something wrong, and then they can learn from it.
And trusting young people, I think, as well, and empowering them and listening to their voices.
Yeah.
So important. Thanks for that. What do you think, Jane, in terms of
Yes,
what we need more of?
You stole my answer.
But listen to young people, involve them in the development of school policy. They need to be involved in conversations on a national level, on a government level. Allow them to share their views and act on them as well. Don't make a token. Parents also have a really important role to play in this space, and it's something they need support on.
Definitely.
So, you know, for schools and teachers here today, we are here to kind of bridge that gap. Schools can't be required to burden their responsibility. There's lots of resources on our Parents Hub that you can highlight to parents. You can send out our parent guides to them. There's information talks. We host webinars as well. So you can keep up to date with stuff on our website that's happening there to help them as well. I know industry have a really important role to play here as well. And we're, you know, we're really glad to see that we're making progress in terms of national legislation and regulation. We now have an online safety commissioner in Ireland. We're one of only a few countries around the world that has that now in place. That is a really, really important step. And the online safety commissioner is tasked with the regulation of harmful online content. So that will hopefully make our social media platforms safer places to be for everybody, but particularly children. And we also have European legislation, you know, the Digital Services Act as well. So we do hope kind of industry catches up with us there then, you know.
So needed, as you said. It can't just
Yeah.
be schools, and I think schools sometimes do feel that they're carrying a lot of the burden on this, so the support is just so important. I wasn't even aware of that commissioner, so it's
really
great to have that
important.
information out there. It's so important.
Yeah.
I'm just conscious of time now, so we probably will just have to wrap up. And just to ask if there are any questions or comments from the audience before we finish. Thanks so much for all of the... Any questions in particular? Comments?
Any questions?
The post-COVID pupils, you
Yes.
see. They all have questions, but they're being very polite.
Yes, Lorraine?
It's not a question, but I just want to say that the connection, I think, between what Deirdre was saying earlier on about who's going to lead the transformation, I think the panel have really done a really good job in answering some of that in my mind in terms of what I've heard you saying today. So I just want to say I really appreciate that, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you. That was excellent, really excellent discussion. I'm very interested in what Eithne had to say, particularly I'm a primary school teacher, and I feel we're very much bridging that gap between, you know, trying to bring in digital citizenship into the classroom, and we're still, on many levels, despite all the policy documents, still to some extent teaching in quite traditional ways. And it's difficult to bridge that gap. The expectations that parents have, for example, about, you know, seeing written work in copybooks and seeing margins and neat work, and trying to sort of open new ways for children to communicate, particularly children who have severe difficulties with handwriting, for example. And I would love for, you know, for us to have that option to say, produce your work whatever way you want, produce it online. And yet we have still sort of a traditional expectation that the child will leave primary school able to handwrite, able to go on into secondary school and sit and write Leaving Cert exams, for example. And it's very difficult to bridge that gap at this point, I find, and very difficult to change the mindset that, you know, there's no point in forcing children to learn one way because that's how we expect them to learn. But it's still very difficult to sort of to get over that barrier with digital citizenship when there's still very much traditional expectations, both in the teaching community, but also amongst parents who feel they don't, you know, they're not quite ready yet for that step. They still expect to see the tests, the results, you know, the scores. And that's still how people are perceiving success in education as opposed to critical thinking skills and being able to think for themselves.
Yes.
And I find that difficult, so I'm just
I
wondering if you have
agree.
any ideas.
And I think this is where we really do need to be confident in ourselves. And actually taken from the Weaving Wellbeing, I think it's in the 6th class programme, the make-believe or pretending.
Yeah.
We have to pretend we know what we're doing. In relation to the output that children have, the fundamental skills are still so important, because if we are not bringing that across in primary schools from their building, their fine and gross motor skills, and fine in particular, I mean, how many of us are still having our children paint on easels, whereas painting with an easel helps develop their pincer grip, but yet we don't, because we have them on pages because of whatever reason, the paper is cheaper, or there's no space in the room for an easel, to now putting them on a digital device, and they're using digital art, which if we can gradually bring in those skills, they're using a tool, but they need the skills in the first place. And I think that's really key in primary level. They still need to be taught the skills. Putting a margin on a page, learn how to do the margin. Now, how would you find a ruler on a digital tool? Well, there are rulers on your word processing, and you teach that as a follow-up of the lesson. And then maybe station work and such. Station work I find tremendous. I've done basically Ashter with Rongachet, which enables the children to have an element of choice and play while they learn. But one of those stations, 1 to 2, I would incorporate some level of technology. One would be the technology as a way to present their information. But the other station, the technology would be where they would actually have to be using and developing the skills within that programme itself. And I think that's key. If we progress with that, parents will see this child coming home with amazing work. You know, to print it off regularly, to stick it into their books, to send home. So I've had children come home, oh, miss, do you mind? I was able to throw my presentation onto the telly at home. You can just do that by, and I said, could you? And just let them explain. And parents were like, wow, my child did that. They're still seeing the text, but they're seeing it in a way that this was their child who couldn't stay on a line or couldn't join two letters together. So there is definitely amazing possibility. We have to stay positive, even if we're not 100% sure of what we're doing. Easy for me to say, I had a ZX Spectrum plugged into the TV at home, but I'm one of the eldest teachers in my school. So if I can get through this, well, okay, I was born and bred IT, they're literally delivered using IT. Yeah. So we have hope. Yeah.
And it is about trust. I think parents will trust us when they see the progress children are making. You know, they might have those doubts, but over time they
have to be integrated and balanced and developed along, where the framework will come in. Yeah. Your digital, your photographing in junior infants, and then your full presentation with verbal and standing and recording, the whole lot by 6th class.
Thanks so much. Thanks everybody. And thank you.